Acknowledging the universal powers that guide and watch over us today, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of Canberra, the Ngunnawal and Ngabri people. We're welcoming you today to this program of Lo'au University, and this morning is our first storytelling program for adults on the Lo'au University media website. So we do welcome one and all to this program today. It's very special for me today because I have a very special guest here, and I would like to introduce her to you. She has been a part of Lo'au from the very beginning, from Lo'au Research Society all the way through to Lo'au University. She's a member of our board of directors, and so I'm very honored to have Lu'isa Ma'ilei Latukefu here today as my special guest. And she's going to be beginning the storytelling for adults. Storytelling is about various people coming to talk about their stories, how they began, where they grew up, their studies, their work life, all the wonderful things that we want to know about people. And so, Lu'isa, without further ado, welcome to our first ever adult storytelling here on the Multimedia Program of Lo'au University.
Thank you, Luseane. That was very kind introduction.
Okay.
And it's like I'm really honored today too, because it's about looking back at our journey as women and as part of, Professor Luseane Lafitani's dream. I think we've been lucky enough to sort of follow, his footsteps, and him having to look after us women in the early days of Lo'au. And also it brings back memories, of my own life journey. So I really appreciate and I feel honored, to be part of this very important part of your program for Lo'au University, or initially Lo'au Society, how we used to call it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lu'isa. As soon as you said you were born in Tonga, in Adelaide College, in Hadeho, it brings up all sorts of things for me, and I would love to go in that one day and just to tease out all the wonderful things that happened when you grew up. But that's a story for another time.
That's right.
What I'd like to also know, you were born there, then, before you came to Australia, you went to school. Maybe, what high school did you attend before leaving Tonga?
Also, just want to mention, I was the eldest. I'm the eldest of 11 children. So Tonga College still it did play a very important part on our upbringing, because it gave us, I think we were privileged growing up at Tonga College, because it gave us the environment that encouraged studying, education, and we had access to sports grounds and watching those boys. It was a boarding school for boys, secondary college, for boys only, and it was boarding. So I always think back and think that I think it was part, that's how my person, you know, and my being, that's how it started. And that's what started that thing about education and awareness, and also having access to a lot of places in Tonga that not everybody from the village would have.
That's
You
right.
know, that had that privilege. So, and in those days, remember Tonga High School was the only high school in those days, and it was set up. The king, when he came back to Tonga, King Tupow the Fourth, then he set up Tonga High School in 1947, and that's the year I was born.
My goodness.
I always say to them, "Oh yeah, that school was set up for me."
Yes.
Only because I was born when it was founded, and I, in those days, Luseane, you know, you said. When I tell my grandchildren about those things, they say, "Nana, does that mean your school was only, you know, was about," and then they worked it out to when I started. So I started at Tonga High School in 1959, class of 59.
Okay. All
35 students class of only one class, whereas now they usually have nearly 100.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just
class.
thinking when you were talking, Lu'isa, about growing up at Tonga College or Atele Boys College. That is quite a unique
Yes.
place to grow up in. Not many of us can say, oh, we grew up in a school in the environment of learning right from the beginning. And your late father, so well-known teacher and tutor of Tonga College for
Yes.
many, many years. And a lot of people have great memories of your family, especially your father. But as you said, you started
The
born
environment.
in an
yeah.
environment of learning.
Exactly. We had no excuse.
You have no excuse. Really, you don't.
And you know, in those days, you know, with telephones, access and stuff like that, we had telephones in Atele
Yes.
that we could, or just a one phone for the whole school, but we could ring.
But you did. You
Yes,
had
that's
one.
right. And we had electricity because they had their own,
Yes.
what do you call it, generator.
Yes.
Yes, so that was really, and mind you, Luciane, in those days, they had to examine our study area from Tonga High School.
All right.
Yeah, we had to.
So the school actually came to your house
That's right,
to check
because
if you had a study.
if your
place?
study area and your sleeping and your accommodation was sort of, what's the word, appropriate, like to, you know, to give you that enabling environment. Yeah, it was really it was a big thing. 'Cause some of the boys from my class, their parents, you know how big families in Tonga,
Yes.
they used to build a little separate like Tongan house for
Right.
for whoever the Tonga High School student of their family, and you had to have the proper lighting and a desk and a chair, yeah, and your own, which was in a big family like mine, Luciane.
Yes. Yes.
I look back now and think, gee, I had that room. There were only 2 bedrooms,
Yes. Yes.
and the rest of them had to bunk in the
Yes.
other bedroom, but.
Oh, you are
Yeah,
quite
they
privileged.
came
And
out.
also being an eldest child too.
That's right.
I think we've had conversations about grow up in Tongan and Tongan families, how the eldest child has a little bit more privilege than the others. And Lu'isa, you were talking about when you set the entry exam into Tonga High School, And I remember even when I set the entry exam, it was quite special, and you were quite privileged to be able to pass that exam
That's
and
right.
get into the school. You know, I guess now it's a little bit different, but way back then,
And it was a big thing for
it was a
parents.
big deal.
Yeah, if you passed the exam to Tonga High School,
Yes.
that, you know, my dad would be walking around
Bit
like.
of a celebration.
And do you know, Luseane, my dad got a private tutor for me, and that was primary school. I was
Yes.
quite fortunate because there were ex-students from Tonga College who were at the training college.
So they were teachers
Yeah, they
anyway.
were almost teachers. So, you know, he got me one to sort of tutor me, like that's in year 5 in primary school. Yes.
So you got, you know, you were well prepared to go
Yes.
into each step, you know, to go into the high school. And then I guess let's go to coming from Tonga High School. How did you, what sort of exam did you have to, you know, to achieve at the end of your high school years to get to somewhere else from there? What was the stepping
We
stone?
had, because it started in class 6, and then in those days, class 6, form 1 up to form 5, and then upper 5th, like you only set the school, New Zealand school certificate.
That was upper fifth.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then they went on from there if you passed that, because most of them, all of the ones who, you know, they had scholarships, they went to New Zealand. Yeah, it was mainly New Zealand, in Auckland, like at,
Right.
what's the name of that place in this, yeah.
Auckland University.
That's right, and the Tongan government had their own accommodation.
Oh,
Vaipupua
at
for
Atalanga.
Atalanga for the
Yes.
girls,
Yes.
and Vaipupua for the boys in
Okay.
those days.
In
Yeah,
Epsode.
yeah, that's right.
Right.
Yeah,
So
but
upper
that-
fifth was
yeah.
like a form 6 in a way.
In a
Now.
way, you just sort of
Yeah.
went. They say upper 5th.
Okay.
But it was quite funny because it's that year when we went Form 4, and you know, all the teachers at Tonga High School were from either New Zealand or, you know, UK.
Right.
They were all, you know, European teachers then. So when you think, we used to learn songs like the Bells of St. Mary's and all those real British. Like,
Yes.
when you think back, it's like colonialism, wasn't it? It's still
In
a
a
little
way,
bit of
in a
it,
way.
in a way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Through education.
Through education, we
Maybe
were
not
taught.
through them coming and taking over our government, but through education.
Yeah, but
I
that's
have
right.
good memories of that
Yeah.
too. Yes.
And of course, remember the Tonga High School in those days, we wore hats, we wore sandals.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right.
And those tunics.
Yes.
And
White
it
hats
was-
for the girls, like the summer
Yes.
hats, and yes,
yeah,
overseas.
just those hats that you see in those British old movies.
That'd be great because I mean, especially with the sun awareness now, it'd be
That's
great to
right.
bring the hats in again.
Oh,
But yes.
it gave us a sense of pride because
When did that stop, Lu'isa? Because when I started at Tonga High School,
Did you wear that?
1968, there were no hats.
no, it didn't last because even while I was still at the And you know what he taught us in class 6 in the high school? He used, because the idea for Tonga High School students, they plan to educate their students, then send them overseas, train them to come back and be the leaders of the departments.
That
and
was
stuff.
the
That
idea.
was his dream, you know, George the Fourth.
Yes.
But he was the prime minister for education, sort of minister for education.
Yes, because he, you know, I mean, His late Majesty, Tupou the Fourth, he was all about education, wasn't he?
That's right.
And he looked at his country, and he wanted to build up his government. And so I guess Tonga High School students, his plan was that they go overseas and they study and learn,
That's
come
right.
back and go into those government services.
And of course, we weren't allowed to speak Tongan. It was all English. Yes.
That's right.
And the
All
thing,
preparation to go
all,
overseas,
yeah,
wasn't
all
it?
prepared and all geared to sort of go overseas. That was the whole aim, go overseas, and that's all we thought of. And when you talk about mentoring in these days, it's not a new idea. Because when I think back, all the ex-students from Tonga High School or other students from Tonga who were studying overseas, they used to come back and talk to us at the school.
Okay.
I remember Eseta Fustua coming back, and she hadn't finished her studies in Auckland, but she talked to us, and all I can remember, Luseane, is that, oh gosh, I hope I'm,
That was the dream.
That's right. Yes.
And I guess that was the dream of most of the students, was that they were going to be able to, go out into the whole wide world with the other parts of the world.
And it wasn't long after that. When was the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II? Was that in the
Goodness me,
50s?
that's a question.
That was just before.
Was it around 54 or
Yes, because it was before we entered Tonga High School. And I think, they talked to us about how Queen Charlotte was, riding in the open carriage.
Yes.
And that was a big thing, I remember, because they said, if our queen, and of course all the press came out with the Queen of Tonga, and that gave us the courage. Like when you go overseas, they already know about Tonga. That was one of those biggest things. I always look back and think about those events that happened.
Yes.
So
World events.
to give you an idea of what we were groomed, right from me at class 6, Mr. Bloomfield would sit there, Luseane, and then he would say, now, when you go overseas, this is how you will drink your cup of tea.
Oh,
He
right
used to
down
say,
to that?
yeah.
Yes.
And then, with the saucer and the cup, and we're all watching him, and of course he wore short.
Yes.
And
And those socks, he wore those.
and he looked so smart.
Yes,
Because,
yes.
and some of ex-students came back, like Siutonga, Tuna. Yeah.
A lot of people will be horrified by that notion that you were punished
Now-
for speaking your language.
Yeah, now they do. But remember in those days, it was, we used to walk down the street, with our uniform, or when we marched for Parliament. There's a sense of pride because they used to think, oh, Tonga High School, those kids can speak English.
Yes.
And didn't worry about it. But that was the first time Tonga High School started to take on the Tongan language as one of the subjects. Now it's very much part of it. But all we did we set the together with that was the big exam for the other colleges. The higher Tongan higher living. So in that year, they tried to teach us Tongan crash course in Tongan. That was quite funny, but
That would be quite difficult, Lu'isa, because most schools would have started from
Yeah,
their first year
that's
of high
right.
school, learning grammar and all that sort of stuff.
My dad taught grammar, you know, and I thought, no. What we did in our class, we had 3 teachers. First teacher, she walked out half day before our first class, because it was just so challenging for our students in those days. Yeah, that was a big thing, Luseane, and I don't even know the grammar that much now, but we were smart. We sort of got our marks from other parts of the syllabus, you know, the Tongan language, like learning about culture.
Because you had strength in other components of that.
That's right, yeah.
Of the syllabus. And I think I remember, and it's still talked about now, that the Tonga High School students are the ones that, you know, that can speak. You know, because it's, you know, when you think about learning another language, it's not an easy thing, you know, and a lot of, you know, because a lot of students, I remember, we're talking about students who've come from other schools to enter into schools here in Australia and New Zealand. Language is difficult. It's one of those blocks that, you know, because it's hard to...
And that would have been a challenge from students from the other colleges.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're finding ourselves in the Tonga High School, and you've sat this, you know, the exam for New Zealand. So where did you go from there? What year was that you were finishing your high school year?
65.
65.
Finished Tonga High School. Yeah.
Finished. And what happened?
Then they were, you know, giving scholarships to the top students. And just mentioning Tonga High School, every year, Luseane, they would cut off. They took a number and then they'll cut off. Remember, students from Tonga High School always went to other schools?
Yes.
Because they had a cut off the number and and your result and everything. And that was really scary, because every year they'd say, oh, there's a couple of
yes,
that's it, and then they went Queensalo College or whichever, you know, their choice, Atere or Toloa.
I see.
Yeah. So some of us who
best and brightest were the ones that were
the survival of the
fittest,
smartest.
really.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh my God.
Because you had those students who were
That
top.
would be quite stressful as a final year
towards
student.
the end. No, but it started right from the beginning,
Okay.
not just the final
So they
year.
were trimming and chopping and...
You'll find that some of the ex-students now, they started off at Tonga High School, then they went finished at, you know, Queensalo there, and they did very well in the other schools.
Yes.
When they had the good foundation.
Yes.
Yes. No, every year, starting from class 6, Form 1 right up.
I see.
Yeah.
Because as we know now, Lu'isa, with education, and a lot of children learn differently now. They're finding out that, you know, maybe little Janet doesn't quite learn properly in a normal school setting, that there's other different schools now that cater to different kids' needs. But in our day, there was a school, and you had to... Once, Lu'isa, are quite happy with that.
Yes.
You know, with that sort of learning, because I think, especially with the Australian government, they're coming back to a basics thing where they're saying, maybe we need to go back and, you know, because kids are getting through to year 10, not reading properly.
No, that's
not
right.
writing
Yeah,
properly.
looking
And as you know,
and
the
spellings
way, yes,
and
they
yes.
need, so they're now putting more funding into reading and
going
you know,
to the basics.
going back
Exactly.
into the basics.
It's like everything else.
Exactly.
It's about that recycling
Yes.
thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
all of a sudden they're saying, oh, it wasn't too bad in those old
Yeah.
days gone by. Maybe we need to incorporate some of those older things, you
Yeah.
know. Because even coming from going to school in New Zealand and then coming here and watching my children at school and looking at the way their syllabus was very different, you know, to what was taught in New
Yes.
Zealand, you know. So, because I often spoke to Sue about how I'm a great believer on teaching basics and classics and looking at people like that, you know, going back to those basic
Yes.
things, which is now all of a
And
sudden
that's
they're
what we
saying,
teach them.
Yes.
Even while I was still working, that's what we taught the mothers, as parents, the first-time parents. It's about the basics,
yes,
and then you just build on it. You know, if you have the basics, you're right.
you've got to have
Yeah.
foundation,
Exactly.
don't you?
Yeah.
For anything, building anything, building our foundation. Good foundation was our research society.
Yes,
That all your people
yes.
were involved with, you know, good, strong people with great ethics and, you know, knowledge to build, because without that foundation, we
You're
wouldn't
gone.
be here today, you know,
You're a
doing this
goner.
stuff.
Yeah.
So coming from Tonga High School to
Yeah. So a lot, you know, the top students and the ones who did so well, they got scholarships. And mind you, I was quite lucky because at that time, like those boys or girls, those students from the other colleges who were just finishing, and then they set the higher living that year that we did the thing. See, they started to give them scholarships like apprenticeships to New
Yes.
Zealand, you know, like that. I think that was in those times they started. Then I saw this they access to the information on my dad's students from Tonga College. I had a little peep into their marks, and I said, "That's not fair. I had better marks than those students." So I went in. The not the director of education in that year, he was Palangi, you know, Mr. Patton, I think his name was. I took myself into the education department at the Prime Minister's office. They were there and knocked and went in. I wanted to see the director, and we were lucky. He came up, but then I was lucky because my dad knew the staff in there. So I went in, I saw the director of education. I said, I just came to make a complaint. I was still at Tonga High School, and he said, "What is it?" I said, "I applied for the radiographer scholarship. I know I did better than those boys, and I knew the boys who got it, you know. I did better in the exam than those boys. How come I missed out?" I remember that was really challenging. And he explained, and he said, they asked for boys. I said, "Well, that's not fair. What, those, you take?" I stood there, Luseane, I cried. I said, "I can do it, you know." And he says, "I know you can do it, but they asked," it was an Australian scholarship, "they asked for boys." And in the end, they had to ring my father to come and pick me up because I was so upset that was my first experience, I think, with that gender in inequality, or you can say inequity. Now they call it. That was my, and I received that in Tonga. I got that first experience, and so my father came and he apologized to the people, and he could understand. He was very supportive.
Good on you, Lu'isa.
I stood my ground. I said,
Yes,
Dad, I
good
know
on
I
you.
did better than that.
See, you were way before your
Yeah,
time.
exactly.
In a
Yeah.
way, because when we think about right from the very young age, then you were
Yes.
challenging ideas and authority.
I think it was that environment. That's why I
Yeah.
always think, because we used to
Because
see.
you're very different from other young
Yeah.
people in those days. And I think it's all to do with your environment
Yeah.
and growing up.
Growing up in
Yeah.
that environment. Because my mom went to Consolidated College, Luseane, and she didn't even get to sit the lower levy, which is the
Right.
one in Clark.
So that's what, third, second form or something?
What would they call them? Class in those days,
Okay.
class 6 in the.
I see.
So she left school before. So, so we were lucky that we were compensated by, because she couldn't help. She couldn't even. And because we went to high school, we taught Mom to speak English. Yes, she did. We were always so proud of that.
Which is a lot of stories of children growing up in those days, because their parents didn't have, not many parents or not many people in those days had the opportunity to go through. And especially with your mum, she got married young. She had her family to look after.
That's right.
That was
11.
That was her priority,
That's right.
But then you got the opportunity to go further.
So I was quite lucky. I was really. High school, So I saw them advertising the nursing scholarships. But before that, I even went and saw the president of the Uniting Church, the Wesleyan Church.
Okay.
He was an Australian, and I asked him, could he organise for me to come and do nursing in Australia? And I hadn't even met him. I just went and saw, and he was quite Mr. Harris. He said, you can either go to Sydney, because there were already women, Tongan girls who were started doing nursing, or you can go to Melbourne. And he was quite happy. He said, I'll make some. I was just, I just couldn't. But then I had to think. The next thing, we had to wait there. The scholarships only said they'll take over once we get here. We'll get our visa, but we had to pay for our own expenses, the flight and stuff.
Oh, so it wasn't a full scholarship?
No, it was,
I see. So it was just study? That was it?
Yeah, to study nursing.
That's a big cost that you had to.
And because my father, a school teacher, he didn't get much. So, but I was quite fortunate because my father bought me a motorbike.
Yes.
That red BSA
Yes.
motorbike to go to school there towards the end of the thing. And I said, all right, Dad, let's sell my motorbike so that I could get my fare, because My father didn't have a bank account, sort of thing. So I said, Dad, let's sell my motorbike and get my fare. And lucky it was a one-way,
Okay,
one-way
you didn't have
ticket.
to,
No,
you know.
yeah,
Because
in
you had to
those
come and
days.
study. You didn't
No,
know
that's
when
right.
you finished.
So that's what I did. That's how I got my
Luisa, do you sort of remember how much it was to come?
Oh
Do you
no,
have any
it wasn't.
memory?
It wasn't even.
It would have been a lot for.
Yeah,
you know.
but it was 1,000 something. What? But was one way. So that was. Yeah, I didn't.
Yes.
We didn't have to go and borrow money.
Yes.
So I got my fare then,
And lost your motorbike.
and lost my motorbike, which I was. Luseane, I was so glad. Then my father was so excited. He bought me. He said, "You're going to Australia. You have to learn to be able to walk in high heel shoes."
Oh.
Coming from the village, and my father is from Whetatoa, my mom from Hatiho.
From the beautiful island of Oahu.
And this is the support that we got. He said, Father went to Premise shop. They told me to go into Viola Hospital, the old Viola Hospital,
Yes.
and enter the PTS school, which is their intake of nurses, and join them for while we
While you
were
were
waiting.
waiting.
Yeah, and Adelaide, she just continued to go to Paul High School while we were waiting. So I did join the little school of nursing, Kunsalo. That's why we were waiting, which was really good because.
And how long was that for?
Oh, that was because we left Tonga in July that
Right.
year. So
Right.
that was only about 4 months or something.
Yes. But it would have been a good 4 months of
I was
introduction,
a good
wasn't it?
experience. And they used me because I spoke English well from
Yes.
Tonga High School.
Yes.
Every time the doctors would come, do their rounds, say, Luisa, go with Dr. Nimetolu or I had to share what I translated, those the real jargon, medical jargon.
I see.
But anyway, that was quite a... Anyway, Luseane, we waited. It was quite a journey. We waited for our visa because we wanted to come overseas.
Of course.
So I went in and I said to education, what's going on? We're still waiting. I think they've started the class that we were supposed to be in.
Okay. Yes.
And then they said, oh, we're still waiting for the Leeton, at the Murrumbidgee. Leeton
okay.
District, it was their Rotary Club that was
I
sponsoring
see.
us. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So they said, oh, we're still waiting for, I think, the president of the Rotary.
See, they wouldn't have realised, Luisa, that there's 2 young women
Well,
waiting
exactly,
desperately. in
especially
Tonga.
this one. I was getting impatient.
Oh.
And I said, can you give me the address of that president of the Rotary Club? And they said, oh yeah, we've done. I said, no, I wrote to him. And I said, we're waiting. We can't wait to come over. We're so excited. We can't wait to come over to Australia. And they've already started the school, that
Yes.
we're supposed to be in.
Missing out on precious time.
The next thing, Lucy, I get this phone call from the Premier's office. The President will be arriving. He came to Tonga. He came to Tonga to meet us. That was quite something,
That's just you, Luisa, again.
He flew to Tonga and, we're so excited, and he was such a great man. I didn't know how important. After, it was,
See, if you didn't make that.
getting too old because it was like
Your aging is your waiting.
yeah, I was 18 then, and
Oh, you're so
I
old, Luisa.
can't wait. But he came. Oh, that was that's really something, Yeah, so that's how we got the scholarship. So when we came back to Leighton, it's just like between Griffith
Yes.
and Narendra in
Yes.
it's a real country, little town. Yeah. So,
And there you go, people, take initiative.
and I remember, Luseane, I always look at you and remember that your mom, Vina, sort of
Yes.
because like, you know how the latest stayed at Marfu's place.
Yes, yes.
And Vina gave us that suit. It was a beautiful little suit to wear. Well, we changed wearing that. She had her tan, I had my tan.
Yes.
Your mum's suit, yeah. That we looked very smart, and it was that's really something.
And I think especially with young women at that time,
Oh,
it would have been important for you to look your best.
students from Fiji.
I see.
Yes, they brought them for, and the visa was the education visa.
Oh,
You know, they were bringing the people like to educate for education.
Oh, okay.
And that year, yeah. So, and Leighton Rotary brought us, you know, Tongan.
Yes.
Yeah, for there were other two girls who were already there. Yeah, so
And I think that's been
both of them have passed now, but
yes.
yeah,
And I think that's, you know, the importance of Rotary clubs and their ongoing work,
that's right.
you know, and their projects all over the world. And look, you were, you know, amongst one of the recipients of the Rotary Club.
That's right. And remember the Rotary clubs in those towns, you know, they were the cream of that society
That's right.
that belonged to the Rotary
That's
Club.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So we were so lucky because we came as Rotary students. And it's like at the time when Australia was starting to bring in, you know, they just finished that white supremacy policy.
Stuff here in Australia, but important parts and times
Yes.
in history. So when you arrived, Lu'isa, you know, grateful to the Leighton Rotary Society. So where did you study when you got here?
Well, at Leighton.
Oh, it was at Leighton.
Oh, in
Okay.
those remember, nursing has already just started going into tertiary, like universities, like very lately.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
So nursing was done in the hospital. You
Yes.
studied and you worked at the same time.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think they're saying, Lu'isa, that that's a much better way to train nurses now.
Yeah.
They're doing a little bit of a turnaround now.
But I think in a way, because I always love education, when they made that big change. But talking about change, Luseane, all my journey, it's like why when we flew to Sydney, we came via Fiji. The two of us were scared, or even of in those days,
Yes.
the Indian taxi
Yes.
drivers, because we weren't used to.
You
all
weren't
the
used to
change.
going
It was
without your family.
Yeah. No, I
So
can't keep up
from Nandi
to Sydney,
Sydney.
and
Yeah,
then flew
India.
from. And when we got to Sydney, the Rotary, like president in Sydney, met us at the airport and put us in the flight to Narendra.
Oh my goodness.
As well, and when we got to Narendra, it was the matron of the hospital who was there to pick us up. And
What an adventure, Lu'isa.
it was.
You know?
And you know, Air India, they gave us apples. And I said to it, I want to take this apple because I don't know whether we're going to have apples where we're going.
Oh.
And I snipped an apple from the plane, like coming
Oh,
through, but
yes.
they didn't have all those scanning
Of
things.
course they didn't. Yes.
And the matron picked us up from the Narendra airport, came, and then I pulled out my apple and I said, look at this, guess what I got? But off the bench, she said, oh, Lu'isa, do you know, she told me about, you're not supposed to do it. I said, yes, but I want it. She said, I know, but no, we're going to get rid of that. And she pulled
Well,
out.
is that sort of like an agricultural thing to,
Yes.
it's about not bringing fruit.
Around Griffith, Narendra and Leeton. Because they had the cannery, the Leetona,
Yes.
in Leeton.
Still. You can still see in some of the tins.
And she pulled up,
Canned in Leeton.
the car that she drove herself, pulled up in front of this fruit shop. And my eyes nearly fell out. She said, Lu'isa, look at all the apples. I'd never seen anything like it. She said, there was no reason for you to bring that little apple. Daniel, I've never forgotten that little journey. But so that was sort of...
See that you're talking about, just coming and being wowed by all the different fruits here in Australia. Because I remember, even growing up, we got fruit, like apples came on a boat.
That's right.
So,
they
and
did.
ice cream and all that. So
And they still do.
you could only have it when the boats came, which was once every 3 months or something? Even when I was growing up. So you never went to the shop and saw, you go into IGA and there's, aisles and aisles of fruit and veggies. Apples and oranges and plums and things like
Yeah.
that. That only happened much later on. So I could imagine you. I most probably would have done the same. Found an apple, put it in my bag, and hope.
We were definitely, how did they used to call them? Fresh off the
And
boat.
quite proud of it too.
Yes, that's right. We were something else, we thought. Yeah, so we and because it was good because we lived in a nurse's home, and most of the
Was that all right, Lu'isa?
yes, because we were Rotary students,
Okay.
we were something in the community, and like I say, Luseane, the people who were in the Rotary Club were the cream of that society. Whenever they had their thing, we were invited to go for the dinner, and they always had us talk about Tonga, talk about and even the Country Women's Club
Yes.
around the area.
Yes, they're
You
very
know.
strong and yes.
They always rang and asked the matron, could they bring the Tongan nurses to do.
You would have been quite a variety and quite interesting for them.
Yes,
Because they wouldn't have been exposed to, to young women from the
from the
islands.
Pacific Islands.
Yes. So you would have
You
been
haven't
quite
seen
the
me
flavour
do.
of the month.
Now you haven't seen me do the Tahitian dance, have
Oh,
you,
Lu'isa, I
I don't
have
think
to
you
look
are.
at that. I
Professor
think
Lafitani seen my.
he might be quite jealous of you being able to do that. Our technician had just reminded us that we've got about 5 minutes. which is great, Luisa, because this is a conversation that has to keep going.
Yeah.
This is just the first, and you know I'm so happy that you are still with us.
Yeah.
And I thought it was 5 minutes, but we have 10 minutes, which is
Oh,
great.
that's good. We
Because we
can
still
read.
need
Yeah.
to get into another part.
Yeah.
You're not going to hear all of Louisa's story today.
Oh no.
It's a big story, and it's full of lovely things like stealing apples from the aeroplane and being accessible to the, to Leeton society,
Exactly.
Leeton High Society,
Yeah.
which is like Rotary and Country Women's Association, and I love those Country Women
And
Associations.
that was a good start, Luseane, because just after the white supremacy, like Australia, we didn't even feel, and having come from Tonga, we were prepared like, yeah, you're Queen of Tonga. She was so they really had a good thing. And it was just multiculturalism was just starting.
Yes.
And
Very new.
Who's the father of multi? Griffith.
Louisa's claim to fame.
Yeah, that's right. But the year when we did nursing, nursing was done at the hospital. It was hospital, but it's like the apprenticeship. You'd study and you work. And they always did 4 years of training. And our last year, they cut it back to like 3.5.
Really?
Yeah, so it was.
So you were privileged to the full 4 years of study?
No.
Oh,
that was the
sorry.
beginning. Yeah,
The
it was the
beginning, I see.
beginning of
Okay.
that cutting, and we thought, oh, wow, we're the first lot that 4 years,
Three
now
and a
they
half
talk
years.
about.
Did you, with to my mum and family in the Christmas holidays.
Right.
So when you were in Leeton, did you go back to Tonga for
No.
Christmas?
No, there was no going back.
So where did you go
Till we
in
finished.
the holidays?
The holidays, we were looked after by
I bet
the
you were.
Rotarians, yeah. And also a lot of the student nurses, no male, just female, most of them were from farming areas around.
Oh, yes.
And Luseane, their parents used to pay for a little holiday thing at Cronulla, or we had the Rotarians in Manly around there. Graduated from nursing school, we took home a couple of our friends because I had to celebrate my 21st. I had to celebrate my 21st birthday in Tonga. And this is how it goes back. That when we got to Tonga, remember Tawakifu Smailohi?
Yes.
He was at the
A3Z.
A3Z, but it was what they call it in those days, the ZCO.
That's right, ZCO.
Now, am I showing my age here?
Oh, mine too.
No,
Oh, yes.
all
So-
that privileges continued like we got there, and then he ran.
Because that's news.
Yes, and news is why.
Nurses, graduated nurses coming back.
Yeah, but see, because we came like with the government, there's a lot
Yes.
of private nurses, like from the church, Methodist
Okay,
church or Wesleyan church, students, they came privately. But because we were, one of those few students who were sort of returning after, he interviewed us on on the ZCO. It was such a reception.
Yes, and your stories would have been, you would have given some other young women in Tonga something to dream about.
Yeah.
Just like when you listen to Lady Fustua talking about her, her
From the
And you know, Luisa, at that time when people returned, it wasn't just your family at the airport. It was a big deal. You had people from the villages and people. Sometimes you arrived and the whole island would know, Luisa is back. Luisa and Adelaide are back, you know, and they would come to see what you were wearing. Because I remember that was a big deal.
It was special because she lived at Lofa Kaitamaki.
Yes.
Ma'afu cleared up the house that we can, and then organized for, what's that?
How many friends did you bring back?
Only three. One.
Only three?
Yeah, a boy sort of, because his parents sort of, I nursed the parents and they became our Australian mum and dad.
Yes.
Yeah, and two other students who were in our class.
That would have been big in Tonga too, these overseas people coming back.
I think Ma'afu gave Ron, his name was Ron, gave Ron a name, a Tongan Matapura name, but you know what's the Fuiwa Whangatapu?
Yes.
You know Lavakana?
Yes.
Ma'afu
My
favorite
Tongan group. He
cleared up Lofakaitamaki because it was...
And had them there.
And brought them, and we had a big party
Luisa.
there. Yeah, I took my brother because he knew my dad. And so my dad said it's all right.
Yes.
And then
Because we're coming to the end of our conversation, but not the end of your story, just the end of our conversation today, because we're going to carry on. I think we might come back next week, you know, before the children or after the children's program, and carry on, because I think it's important that we keep going on. And our technician keeps giving me these signs.
Can I just say this last thing? Because I know in our technician professor, I know in a Tongan thing sometimes, when you share your own little story, but it was at the time when it was the post, feminism.
Yes.
Black feminism were trying to get in and tell their own stories and to be recognized. And that's how I get saying, that's it. That's my story. Feminism is right on the...
You started very young.
Yes.
With your story of feminism.
Exactly.
You started very young when you went to see... when you went to see that... Yes, the director about not being able to get into radiography. But I just remember, Luisa, just going back there a little bit, it was mostly men that did that job. So I guess they just thought would give opportunity to some of the boys.
And I didn't know that. You know, I just thought everybody.
You were just a bright spark that, and you carried on, and your lights carried on shining brightly, and I have been very privileged to know you, Luisa, and continue to know you. As we finish off today, is there something you just want to say to whoever's listening about your experience of storytelling and how this is going to keep going?
Yeah, because I think when I arrived in Australia, women, like I said, feminism, women were telling their stories, and especially black women.
Yes.
They were coming through and saying, look, we want our stories told.
We're here.
That's right. And this black woman
Yeah.
Yes. I thought, and I was proud to be, and that's because Tonga High School, Tonga College, and even the people of Tonga prepared me, my teacher, Paul Bloomfield, prepared us to face because there was still a lot of racism.
Yes, and you grew up at a time whereby Her late Majesty, Queen Charlotte, put her mark in the world.
That little dot in the world
map. The world, and everyone even now still remembers.
Opened the doors for us, women.
And showed us that we can make a mark in the world, in which you have a big mark, not just a little dot, a big mark. But thank you, Luisa, for being with us here today.
Oh, thank you.
And beginning your story. So we won't say telling your story because it's not finished. Beginning your story and journey. Yes. And there's more to come. But thank you all very much for being with us during this hour. Absolutely.
That's right.
Because that empowering, even though we're here, 2021, but there are things that still need to be done. You know,
Exactly.
Still.
It's
still.
about thing repeating
Absolutely.
itself.
Repeating
Same
itself.
challenges, but
Same. Might be different countries or different homes or different schools or churches, but still there's challenges
yes. And it's about education.
about education.
You just can't do that.
Can't do without.
That's right.
MALO OFA ATU.
As our professor always encourage us women.
Yes.
Thank you,
Loudly
Professor
in some
Lafitani.
ears.
That's right.
Thank you so much.